Hello and welcome to Skeindeer Knits. My name is Ellie and I am a Norwegian living and knitting in London. You can find me as a designer on Ravelry under the name Skeindeer Knits, and you can follow me on Instagram under Skeindeer. And do please join in on the Ravelry group Skeindeer Knits, which is the best place to take part in knit-alongs, get pattern support and take part in when there are giveaways or conversations, get your questions answered for this podcast and that kind of thing. So welcome back if you are a returning viewer, and welcome to new viewers. In case you aren't aware, this is a knitting podcast. I just sit here for about an hour and talk about knitting things. It's been a week. I am, like I said, a knitting designer. It's something that started very small and then very quickly skyrocketed. And the thing about designing is that summer is a pretty dead period as far as the market is concerned. So I spend the summer developing patterns for the winter and publications and that kind of thing. And that means I won't have much to show for in terms of what I've knitted. There is one FO and pattern to be announced in this episode, but that is pretty much all there is. So I will be talking about other things, so yeah, stay tuned. The other thing I would like to point out is that it is just melting hot in London. It's been like this for about a week, and this is the third heat wave we've had this year, and it's gonna last for another 2 weeks. We're talking like 30-degree weather Celsius, and there will always be some who are like, well, why don't you turn on the aircon? And that is just not a thing that they do here in the UK. Like, I would happily buy air conditioning, it's just like it's so expensive. That's not an option. So the best thing I can do is to have all the windows open, because there is wind. It just needs to come in here, which means we are at the risk of some noise. There was just a baby making some weird noises outside now. There was a plane passing just as I hit record earlier. The trees are making noise. Everything's gonna make noise. So that's gonna happen. It was either that or no podcast, because and I have a south-facing flat, so you can imagine what that's like. Anyway, it's been a week. I've talked about the Tits Out collective earlier, and I'm going to talk about that right away right now. So if you don't want to hear me talk about tits, that's that episode for you. That's pretty much all I have to show for in terms of knitting this week. I did a pattern for Countess of Blaze's Tits Out collective project, which was a collaborative project for all dyer to come together and make her If I Want Exposure I Will Get My Tits Out colorway, and just do their versions. And then the Countess opened up for designers to take part, and people who make project bags and notions and, you know, things like that. And I make patterns, and I was gonna get in on this because it is primarily a charity project. So people have to give a minimum of either £3 or 20%, depending on if you do yarn or patterns. Obviously £3 of a pattern is entirely the entire pattern, so that's why there's a 20% rule here. And you give that amount to charity. I chose the same charity that Countess of Blaze chose because it seemed so appropriate for the entire story behind all of this. If it's with my pattern, if it's with stuff that I believe in. So I am giving 20% of my pattern revenue for this particular pattern to Women's Aid in the UK that help women get out of domestic abuse relationships and also preventing domestic abuse. So they're really great, and this is the pattern. I am not going to put the photo that I took of the pattern up here, simply because I know a bunch of you watch this on full screen, which already makes me a bit nervous. But I am not going to put a photo where I'm essentially posing topless, clasping my breasts with these mittens on your full screen when your entire family is watching. Not gonna happen. So these are the mittens. They say no. Say no to just all the nonsense, to choose a family friendly term. Say no to undervaluing women's work, and to misogyny and domestic abuse and sexual assault, and just say no to all the unfortunately awful stuff that we sometimes have to put up with, and say no even though we shouldn't have to. So that is essentially the idea behind these, and this is the palm side, which looks pretty cool, courtesy of Ultimate there. I'm really happy with these. Oh, that looks like I haven't woven in an end. This is my hairband. I have finished these. Yeah, finished. So that was some of the things I haven't been able to show you earlier, and it's up now. You can see it, and you can see it on my Instagram with slightly more risky photos. Now I'm just going to talk about those photos for a bit, because that was a bit of a big step for me. Like, I always preach body positivity and autonomy over your own body, doing what you want with it. I'm not very good at practicing it. I don't have the best body image, best feeling about my body. I used to be obese. I don't think I classified as morbidly obese, but I definitely classified as obese up until I was about 20, 21. I was big, and I was big for a long time, so it shows on my body to this day. Even when I was down to a very, very kind of baseline weight for someone of my height and age and gender, I wasn't happy with how I looked. It just, everything hangs, and there's like underskin fat, and that shouldn't be a problem. And if I was talking to someone else who had the body I did, I would say, go you look awesome, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And when it comes to myself, I'm like, I feel like I'm carrying the punishment of having been an obese child, and it's a struggle. It's always going to be, because I've come to realize now, like 8 years after my weight loss, that things are just not going to go swoop back up again for me. So taking my clothes off and taking those photos with the mitts on the tits, that was that was something. And I wasn't having the best of days on the day that all of this went up, the whole Tits Out collective. And when you put up something that risky, then, you know, it could go either way, and it meant so much to me that you guys were so supportive. All of the support, at least 100 messages, I think, that came in. I don't know what to say. Thank you. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get back to everyone and show my appreciation, so I'm showing it here right now. I did keep up with it, I just wasn't able to engage with it, but I so appreciate how you applauded my message, courage, and attempts at being inclusive as well, because I understand it's difficult for a lot of people when we're like, woo tits, and then some people have very difficult relationships with breasts for whatever reason, and that is valid. Their feelings are valid, and I thought, you know, this is for everyone. So I have so many thoughts and feelings about this. It was a very emotional thing. Not the reason why I was having a rough day. It was, on the contrary, one of those things that helped that day not be utterly terrible. So thank you so much. I also want to thank those of you who have purchased the pattern. That meant a lot. And yes, 20% of what you bought will go straight to charity. I'm very proud of all of this, so thank you. So if you want to have some defiant mitts for stroppy, stubborn people, that's something you can get on Ravelry. They're called If I Want Exposure, I Will Knit Mitts for My Tits. Because you kind of had to name the pattern something along the lines of the colorway, and I thought, you know what, that's a pretty cool name, because knits and tits and mitts, it all rhymes. So I'm gonna take these off now because it's too hot for mitts, even too hot for mitts. I made this in Røma Finul. Actually the red is PT2, but you can find this colorway with Finul as well. Believe it's called 424, and I have the colors, the shade cards on my wall, because I look at them that much. I figured might as well, they look pretty. So there we are. I think I ran out of things to say. I guess I have all the thoughts and feelings and opinions about, you know, the general movement. It's been so moving and so meaningful. See the photos, see the products people have come up with, to see that we're all been on the same level, same equal exposure. And I really enjoyed going through the kind of collage that Countess of Lace had put up with every maker. I wasn't gonna buy anything, but that didn't work out, so I have 3 things coming my way. I got 2 different versions of self-striping exposure yarns, and I also got another sort of sock colorway. And also have to comment on the actual photo shoot itself, because in my head I thought, you know, I've seen all these photos of people holding lots of yarn in front of their chest and it looked pretty tasteful, and I thought, I want to do that. Turns out that mitts don't cover as much as yarn, and so when I did that I was like, you know, and then the rest is just like bright white skin, I looked very naked. And what was more is that the camera picked up my skin color more so than the mittens, so it kind of got very dark, so you couldn't really see the mitts. And when I tried to make it take in the mitts more, my skin is so pale it just blew out the entire camera and it's just white. Like, you can take the little sample tool in Photoshop and it will say FFFFFF, which is the code for white. I think I got some nice photos in the end. Very happy with them. I think it's been an exercise of a lot of things for me. Also pretty funny that the best way I get good light is with natural light. So I stood shirtless in front of my window, living in a city, taking photos of myself. I don't think anyone was looking at my window, so I think I was fine. But yeah, that was the thing I did. So that is all I have for knitting. That is everything. I'm gonna link to both the pattern and my project down below. It consists of just color work and garter and rib. It's probably the easiest fingering weight to sport weight mitten I have done so far. Chart can be a bit of a sort of, you need to focus, but it's like the thumb is just garter. You don't even have to get the right stitch count, quite frankly. Yeah, it's easy. And I did it fairly quickly despite it being at a very tight gauge, and the size range is pretty wide, so there you go. It should fit everyone. I really wanted to do it in the colorways that, you know, was the sort of purple, yellow, whatever, but I didn't have that. You know, there was no time. This has all been a very, very quick project. It's been so much fun, and I am very excited to be able to donate whatever the amount will be to Women's Aid. So thank you all so much, honestly. And yeah, like I said, all I have for knitting, I have been knitting other things. They are upcoming designs. I think one will be launched next week, so that is quite exciting. But aside from that, I have mainly been focusing on my Hodgson's Joy. It doesn't look very different from last time, so I don't think it's worth showing you. So I thought I'm gonna talk a little bit about the knit-alongs I am hosting and acquisitions, and eventually some prices. So I am hosting 2 knit-alongs at the moment. There's one that has closed, so I'm going to briefly mention the other 2, talk about acquisitions, and then talk about the closed knit-along. Very strange order, very strange order. I am hosting the Skeindeer sock along, where we are going to knit my sock patterns probably for the duration of this summer, because socks are good summer projects, so I'm going to keep that open. Any of my patterns are eligible. There is no deadline as of yet. I'm thinking end of August, maybe. It's just gonna last for a long time, and you can enter with as many pairs of socks as you like. And the other knit along is the year-long knit along, where we are making 6 pairs of colourwork mittens for the duration of 2018, and I'm catching up. So there, I have one acquisition, my subscription for Bladet Garn, the #1 kind of, or only really, Norwegian indie designer magazine. I kind of pitched them as the kind of Norwegian equivalent of Pom Pom, but I will say they are a lot different. The style they focus on is different, and they do seem to have a sort of 50-50 focus on knitwear for adults and children. I think the children's knitting scene is a lot bigger in Norway than it is here, from what I am experiencing. So that makes sense. I think they are just nailing their target audience more so with that. I also want to add, speaking of that, I was interviewed by Knit Like a Norwegian. I will try to remember to link to that below. If I forget, you can Google Knit Like a Norwegian and find her blog where she has interviewed me, where I mainly talk about moving to London, how my knitting and knitting designing thing started, and also kind of my musings of different kinds of knitters and how it's, and maybe I didn't get to that point clearly enough, but my point was like, I prefer being with all of them. So, you know, you have kind of practical, affordable acrylic knitters, you have luxury knitters that spend a lot, you have baby knitters, you have a lot of groups. I'm like, let's all come together. We all love knitting. I just like, I may seem like in that interview that guy was segregating, but I'm kind of coming from the opposite perspective, so kind of wanted to clarify that. But I think, yeah, it was a really fun interview, very exciting to be interviewed, and you can check it out there. So Bladet Garn, as you will see, it's got this like barcode in the front. At first I was like, why? It wasn't there before. I think I know why, because now you can buy this magazine in a lot of kiosks in Norway. So like where you get your newspapers and magazines and coffees, you can get this magazine now. How awesome is that? Like last time I checked in my hometown, it was really difficult to get this magazine. Maybe a devoted yarn shop would have it, but probably not. And now it's getting quite easy to get hold of. You don't need to just get it on the internet, so that is brilliant. Now this is their blue theme. That was the theme of this magazine, just blue. I don't know why I didn't submit. I guess I didn't have time. Here is a shawl and the brilliant Lena Tustist on this beautiful top. There's a cute raglan cardigan there. That looks like a really fun knit. Some garments for the adults as well. These are adorable. As you can see, children's knits are in focus, and this dress is just crazy magnificent. And I love this very simple sweater. That is something I could see myself wearing. So those were the patterns in here. They talk a lot about the color blue and other things. I haven't looked through it properly, so this is the very just quick rundown of the magazine I got in the mail not that long ago. We have this like weird thing where we got a new door which has a opening for letters in the door, but our postman seems to have a hard time changing his habits, so he keeps putting it in the mailbox that hardly any of us check, and we need a key to open it. So things often stay there for longer than they should. Now the theme for this episode seems to be blue, because I got an acquisition only like half an hour ago in the mail. I did not think it would arrive this soon because it was just dyed and shipped out to me. I got these! They're brilliant! And why did I get them? You say, what was this? Are you buying more yarn, Ellie? Yes I am, but that's not this yarn. This yarn is for a design I'm working on in collaboration with NinaPetrina and also Sticky Lisa, and they are making a gradient publication. I believe I'm allowed to talk about this, and I will be sharing you the process. You may have to wait for the finished object, but the process will be here. I have given my test knitters very strict instructions to not share, because that is just too much to moderate at this point. But you can see what I share, and eventually test knitters will be allowed to share. I will let them know, and then I will make a hashtag so you can see the different variations of the design I'm coming up with. But yeah, it uses blue, and this yarn is very exciting. I'm going to take one out so you can see it a bit closer. I might just cast them today. Got a lot of other things to do, but oh well. It is a jeans blue gradient, as it's called, and it's dyed on Norwegian lamb's wool by Hillesvåg. This is great. So it's called thin Norwegian lamb's wool, but Hillesvåg calls it vilje, which means will, but it could also be a name, which I guess will is too. I don't know. It just occurred to me. It comes in 100 grams, 375 meters. She usually sells these on 50 grams. So I would say for most sizes, making this product will probably need 2 kits. The kits you can actually get from Knit with Attitude that have international shipping, and they're based just up the road from here. But I had this sent to me all the way from northern Norway. I'm gonna cast on today. This is like one of those weirdest things I've done. I've had a whole garment commissioned. I have only knitted one garment design of my own before, and now I've written down this entire pattern, sent it out to test knitters, and I haven't knitted a stitch of it myself yet. That is nerve-wracking. So I am fairly confident with my designing skills at this point. I love spreadsheets and size grading and just like coming up with the whole thing, but whether it works, you can't really know until you've tested it. And that was like a bit of a controversial thing to say, because a lot of people now seem to think that tech editing is all you need. As long as the maths is good, it's all good. And I'm like, you still need to know that it works with other people's brains and bodies. That's my opinion. So I think test knitting is still essential, and it's nerve-wracking to see if my maths are gonna work. Really. I've come up with a lot of new things. It's not just me redoing a pattern I've done before and make it work for this kind of gradient thingy. I've done a lot extra things that I think is kind of leveling it up a bit. It will also be easier to follow. So I think it'll be good. And my test knitters seem very happy with that thus far. And what's also fascinating is that I am writing this in both Norwegian and English, because this publication is going to be in Norwegian, so I have no choice there. And I always write my patterns in English, and they are thinking about translating it, and it does allow me to have a non-Norwegian test knitters. So I've done both, and it's fascinating to compare the two, because I've essentially just translated it. I haven't done different writing styles, but oh boy, is this making me very much aware of the different writing styles of Norwegian and English language patterns. Like, even the current indie designing scene in Norway will write somewhere in between the international way and the old school Norwegian way. The old school Norwegian way is very condensed, it's very vintage. It's like a few paragraphs, a whole like one paragraph could be the entire garment or half of it. You don't get that step-by-step, line-by-line, row-by-row, round-by-round kind of thing that you get in English language patterns. And I say English language patterns, I mean the ones that are currently made by indie designers up on Ravelry, kind of in this scene that we are in. There might be the old publications that are still kind of old school. But the ones I'm talking about tend to be very, very, very detailed. And even if I write it in that style, there could still be details missing, according to some. Haven't really had that, but you know, there's some that feel like you can never say enough. I believe you need to be clear and concise, personally. Whereas when I write in Norwegian, suddenly I am exceptionally thorough relative to Norwegian pattern writing, because they still write in that very, you know, few paragraphs kind of thing, not row by row and round by round. Even though I'm writing the exact same style, English and Norwegian, it's suddenly, because it's translated, it's like, whoa, that was very clear and step by step, and almost a little bit too helping and hand holding, and I'm like, but it's the same. It's just like my mental standard for the two languages becomes so apparent when I do that. And I think it's good to maybe introduce some of this step-by-step approach to Norway, because right now the current writing style you will find a lot in the bigger companies, knitting publications. A lot of people feel a bit lost when they follow them. Unless they have some wiser aunt or grandma around, they don't often know what to do. So it might be good to actually introduce it a little bit to Norway, but I do also want to vouch for introducing some of the Norwegian writing style to the international community, because it opens up so much. You are so liberated with that style. I was talking to Amy Florence of the Stranded podcast when she was doing a Marius, and that's when she kind of did that kind of Norwegian format for the first time. She was just like so, I hope I don't misrepresent your experience, Amy, but yeah, she was just so freed to just like modify, just like, oh, stitch count, sleeve length, short row shaping, just like whatever. There's room for it because it doesn't specify every round, you know? There's an awful low noise outside now. They have been refurbishing one of the council estates across the road. So this is the case every day. So that's always been the case while recording. It's just like now the window's open, you can properly tell. But hey, I am very excited about casting this on. I have no idea how I'm going to finish this in time, because the deadline for me is the 10th of August. I have like a bit more than a month to do this entire thing. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I have a PhD to do. I have lots of other designs that need knitted. So now that I have covered that design project that is going, unfortunately might mean that I will have less to show for the next month. Also, I am gonna go into some prize announcements for the Vinterfjell knit along. So there we are, getting the old laptop out, which I am now about to replace. I am very excited. I have a Lenovo and it's lasted me for like 4.5 years. I love them, but I'm getting a new Lenovo because, while I say this is doing pretty well for 4.5 years, it has gotten into some habits, like the hinges are a bit so and so. It seems to think that I am rotating it when I'm not, because the screen rotates. Shuts itself off if it gets too stressed. Has some quirks here and there, like the spacebar doesn't really work, so it's time. But yeah, it's doing pretty well. So I am very fortunate for this knit along to be able to give away 4 skeins from Circus Tonic Handmade in Australia. Now I don't have these skeins here because she's sending them from Australia to save some of the shipping in the process, so I'm including a photo here. They're beautiful, And we decided to give away 3 to the first winner, 1 to the second, and now I'm gonna give away something to the third winner. So hopefully that will make everyone, well, not everyone, 3 people very happy, and the rest of you, well done, well done. I think this has been so much fun. I wish I could keep this cal going for ages and ages. I've been loving it. We are certainly going to have more garment knit alongs in the future when I get more garments out there. It's just a bit tedious process right now. Not tedious for me, obviously I am knitting, but you're not seeing any of it. Just, it will happen. It will happen. We will do this again. So the winner for 3 skeins of that beautiful colorway is, I'm gonna try to pronounce this right. Usernames are never quite clear. DMA Wunker, that name. You get 3 skeins. Do get in touch with me so I can get your address over to Circus Tonic Handmade and we can get sorted. Congratulations. I love to see your sweater. It was absolutely beautiful. I think you did a great job and faced some of the challenges you had with changing tension for yourself really well. It looked beautiful. Second winner who gets 1 skein is Grey Autumn Rain. So do get in touch with me, send me your address, I will pass it on to Hannah Circus Tonic Handmade and you shall get a skein. Third winner is Obsti or OBST, who will win this little goodie bag that has the pom-pom logo on it. I got a bunch of things when I went to this pom-pom event and turns out I have a few of the things already, so I decided, well, this could just become a whole giveaway thing. So it includes a old issue of pom-pom magazine, which I believe is quite hard to get hold of right now. So it looks a little bit bent. It's not really. So that's it. This is issue 13. I think they've just tried to just get rid of their old issues now. So they really shouldn't be easy to get hold of. So you will get that. I am also including the other things in this goodie bag, which is kind of fun and ditzy things. It comes from the London Loom. So they weave a lot of novelty stuff. So it comes with a jar of some very funky things. It's up to you how to use them. It's just like stuff you can put along with a yarn, and it's weird and quirky. It also comes with this kind of vatting, felting stuff. Again, up to you if you want to spin it or use it for stuffing or felting, whatever is a thing you could do. And this I think is beautiful. It's a cone with some yarn, and I want to say this yarn gets pretty close to the kind of yarn that Hulse Super Soft is and that kind of thing. It was really perfect for me, but I am not short of Hulse Super Soft, so I thought I will include it, even though I think this is absolutely lovely. Now be aware, since this is on a cone, it probably has some spinning oil on it. It does feel okay, but I would give it a wash afterwards. I think it will feel a lot lovelier then. So this is by Knoll, so it's called S Soft Wool. So I think this is in the Super Soft family as well, which is why I suspect it's very similar to Hulse. So that will go in there. And lastly, I am adding a skein in the same shade as the bag and the yarn that's in here. Apparently there's a theme going on, and this is a alpaca skein from Chilla Valley, which is a British alpaca. It's natural fleece color, worsted spun, recommended on using on 4.5 to 5.5 millimeter needles. Feels absolutely lovely. It's a fairly high twist for alpaca, I want to say. You can have a close-up. So that is pretty representative. So I'm going to put that in your bag. Do get in touch with me, Obsti, with your address, and this will be shipped out to you. Apparently this is the podcast episode for giving away stuff, because I announced a giveaway last week. I don't usually do giveaways. I try to save the stuff I give away for cows, but this was a very special one. So 3 winners will win one of these each. A issue of Bladet Garn, the magazine yarn in English. So I have drawn the winners. I'm going to tell you what they wrote, because the question was, you know, which Norwegian designer you like to knit from. I tried to encourage people to just not mention me. Not that I expect you to like have me as your favorite, just because that is the common denominator. So I just thought that was worth clarifying. And this is not me fishing for. So the first winner is Bladet. She says, Sticky Lisa has pretty patterns. I think the pom-pom shawl would be lovely to make, and of course all the pom-poms in different colors. I am so glad you mentioned Sticky Lisa. Sticky Lisa is huge in Norway, and I just, yeah, it makes me very happy when she is mentioned. And she's working on the whole gradient thing that I am kind of contributing to, so it's pretty fun. And the second winner is Sushi Shoe, who says, also, I really like Sticky Lisa. I discovered her by looking through Bladet Garn patterns a while ago, and I love how nature inspired her designs are. For example, I love the lovely Bolero jacket, so that's a Bolero jacket by her. So you get an issue of Bladet Garn. I hope that, I don't know if she has a design in this one, but hopefully you will find some Norwegian designers that you like there as well. And third, Bugga. I think that's how I say her name, Bugga. Again, right here, just in case. I'm a big fan of Pinneguri. I own a number of her patterns, but so far I have only knitted one. I knit the Damejacka, Loppa, or the Fleece cardigan. So many people mentioned Pinneguri in this thread. I was very happy to see that. I often feel like you find me as a Norwegian designer and you kind of stop there. There's so much to explore, and I highly encourage you to go through this thread and find other Norwegian designers. They may not be that Norwegian knitting influenced. A lot of them have their own personal style. Some of them draw on traditions, and some of them draw from the more international wave of knitting and current fashion outside of knitting even. It's not that you necessarily go to Norwegian designers to find you know, light cardigans and that kind of thing. So that is a recommendation for me today. So, as I am running a little bit short on the knitting content for the aforementioned reasons, I thought we could talk about knitting needles, my journey with knitting needles and my current preferences. I just want to say up front, I have tried to record this probably 10 times and been frustratingly interrupted by my neighbors right next door who are hammering at this brick wall. It is loud. There is like no way I could include this, so if this seems at all awkward, it's because I'm cutting out a lot of knocking. This was very unexpected. Anyway, I look like I'm naked. Oh dear. Needles. I started out like most people with some straights and circulars on fairly matte kind of acrylic needles. Some of the cables were rather stiff and plasticky. Even when the cables were good, the needles were often a little bit too matte and grippy. So, as I am running a little bit short on the knitting content for the aforementioned reasons, I thought we could talk about knitting needles, my journey with knitting needles and my current preferences. I just want to say up front, I have tried to record this probably 10 times and been frustratingly interrupted by my neighbors right next door who are hammering at this brick wall. It is loud. There is like no way I could include this, so if this seems at all awkward, it's because I'm cutting out a lot of knocking. This was very unexpected. Anyway, I look like I'm naked. Oh dear. So these are my knitting needles. I have my fixed needles in this diesel toiletry bag, and I have my interchangeables in here. So I'll be talking a lot about interchangeable needles today, but I thought I'd focus on my beginning first. I started out like most people, I think, on fairly matte needles. These prim needles are probably a very good example of the kind of matte material I'm talking about. Often the cable is also sort of a see-through plastic that's quite stiff. These prim needles have a very nice cable. So I've been talking a bit about prim needles. They were one of my earliest ones and I still quite like them. But it depends on what the needle has been covered with. If it's a glossy cable, I think it's great and it's smooth and the joints are fairly good. But I stay away from the matte ones now, which is a shame because they're 30cm circulars, only come with matte needles. And I think they are great. They really nailed the needle cable ratio for sleeves, for instance. But sadly I just found myself not using them, and Addi and other needles do make 30cm, I think that's 12 inches. So primarily prim is mostly being used as a 16-inch 40cm circular for me right now, which is great for hats and for sleeves. I do think their longer circulars has a place. It's just that I personally prefer Chagus for magic loop and interchangeables for longer cables, garments and stuff. But if you don't have that preference, I strongly recommend a fixed glossy needle, prim needle, fixed circular. They're really good. Now, the other needle that you can find often in Norway is Addi needles, and they're often sold under the label Sandnes or PT. But they're Addi needles and they're often Addi turbos. So this is what the Addi turbo look like. They have a sort of brownish cable and very nice glossy needles and not a very snaggy joint, but a tad bit. Sadly, I find the cable to be a little bit too rigid for magic loop. So again, with Addis, I will prefer a 40 to 30cm for sleeves and hats. I did love the Addi lace, the red lace, for the longest time. I just or they're just called lace. I'm mixing up with Chara Goose there. Anyway, called lace. They got golden needles, fairly pointy tip, not too much, and red cables that kink like nobody's business. I didn't think this bothered me until I tried needles that didn't kink, and I'm like, okay, that actually makes a difference. So these have sadly also been retired. They also snag a little bit, but they are good quality needles, but they're not good for magic loop because that is when they kink up. But I still have a lot of love for Addi when it comes to their 30 to 40 centimeter circulars for hats and sleeves. I do want to say something about the Addi interchangeable clicks. I have never used them and I don't plan on buying them, mainly because of reviews. They have been positive to some extent, but people have often said that the join isn't particularly smooth, and it's a click, so you click it on, and if you click it off by accident, it comes off and your stitches come off and it's just a mess. However, with, you know, most interchangeable needles, they screw on. So if they screw accidentally off, you get a snag that kind of warns you, hang on, your needle is coming off. So I really do prefer those kinds of interchangeables. So that is all I have to say about Prim and Addi. Very high quality German brands, but they've sort of been limited to short circulars for me for the time being. Although I do have a lot of long circulars, so when I want that, they're actually pretty good for that as well. But I came across interchangeable needles, and my first meeting with interchangeable needles was Knit Pro. So I keep my Knit Pro needles in a Chara Goose bag because Chara Goose has really good knitting bags, and yeah, Knit Pro has upped their game a bit lately, but the bag I got these needles in wasn't great. So I have my Knit Pro Novas in here. They used to be my one true love for the longest time, and I still use them for garments. And I also bought the sizes that were not included, so 3mm, 325mm and 375mm, as well as the shorter needles, so these are good for hats as well and sleeves, and also the more chunky needles like these. And I have the Symphony Dreams that are kind of just different colored symphony woods, and highly similar to Lykke needles. They just have different appearances, and I want to say Lykke maybe a bit shorter needle, like they're still equally sharp and blunt, but they're a bit shorter. What's the other way around? Possibly. I don't use Lykke interchangeables because I already have these and they really do fulfill the same job for me. But they are, as someone who prefers metal needles, they are pretty good and nice and smooth and slick. And with Knit Pro, the advantage is that the cable fits. Prim even produces some of the interchangeable cables, so that is compatible. Drops needles are compatible, knit picks are compatible. Knitted Pride and Knit Pro are the same things, obviously they are compatible. And also have actually some Knit Pro Nova DPNs for sock sizes that I never use because I'm not a DPN girl, but they are here. So what happened? What happened to my great love for Knit Pro? I used them for the longest time. I used them right up until I started this podcast, and still to some extent. Well, there are other needles that I kind of prefer over them. Not because Knit Pro is bad, because just the others have other interesting features. But Knit Pro has also lowered their production standards, sadly. For a while I thought it was because I just used Knit Pro for so long, that is why the needles come off more easily, that is why things are starting to look a bit more wonky. No, this has become an increasing problem with Knit Pro needles for many users. I think it's to do with the change of production location maybe. What happens often is actually where the cable joins with the cable join where you attach the needle, that comes off. That has happened to me more times than I can count, and yes, I know I can contact Knit Pro and have it replaced, and I've done that several times as well, and quite frankly it's getting a little bit tedious. And lately I've heard myself and several people have the issue of the needle and the cable don't seem to fit anymore. The join isn't that smooth and they look like they're not made for each other. So even though they will happily replace anything that doesn't work out or gets broken, even if you sit on them, there is something of the production quality that has sadly gone down, which is such a shame, because Knit Pro really had the most affordable quality interchangeable needles that I knew of. And I'm glad I still have some from the older production because they are still good to use. But yeah, it is a great shame. But I will say some things have gotten better, like they have actually changed some of their more rubbery cables with some even more flexible color-coded cables. So they are pretty nice to use. It's possible that they kink up as easily as the Addi red cables, but I haven't had that yet. Then again, I also haven't knitted magic loop with them yet, so I don't know. So it makes sense then to, in the same breath, talk about the Knit Pro Zings, which I use a lot, especially for garments. Same with the Novas, they are very similar, just a little bit more blunt. And I actually quite like needles that are a little bit on the blunt side of sharp, because they're good for the kind of yarn that I like to use in my colorwork knitting. I don't think very sharp needles are good for very sticky yarns, because the little fibers that poke out everywhere, that is very good for getting the colorwork to stick together and, you know, makes this sort of Velcro effect that means you can stick with the yarn. Introducing that to a very sharp needle where that little point can hit those little fibers, it slows you down. So I think these are very good for that. I have bought some extra sizes because I do enjoy using them. They come with the new cables, these color-coded cables. And this thing still smells like a new car, even though I had it for nearly a year. So my feelings for Knit Pro are kind of mixed. The cables are better, the cases are better. Really like this case. But there is an issue with the cable join nowadays. The way the needle comes off, the way the cable join doesn't seem to actually fit the needle as well. They need to fix that, but if they do, it's actually still a pretty good affordable range of needles that's highly compatible with other brands. So I still gladly use Knit Pro and will endorse them to people who want to get their first interchangeable set. But I have become a little bit lukewarm just because of these aforementioned issues that I see coming up again and again with myself and other knitters. So what happened? I was a happy user of Knit Pro. I had my fixed Addis and Prim. What else could I want? Well, I joined this knitting scene and lots of people were talking about these higher. More specifically, I think it was when the Snow Melt Mystery Knit Along by Helen Stewart came up, and she was knitting with higher needles and expressed how those really sharp needles were good for that kind of shawl knitting. And I 100% agree. I just bought them because I was curious to find out. So these are my higher sharps. I got them as first I just got one fixed needle and I found I love them. They don't weigh anything, they're like paper and they're really pointy, and I think that's great for superwash yarns, you know, the kind of yarn that hand dyers use. So your usual hand dyed yarn I will always pair with a good higher sharp. This is a higher sharp, very pointy, very pointy. My finger always looks a little bit worse for wear because of these needles, but it's worth it. So I got the whole set, and as you will see, I actually have two sets because I, like I said, found out that higher sharps, very sharp needles in general, aren't great for my favorite kind of yarns. They're great for when I use superwash yarns from hand dyers, but I run into problems with my favorite yarn. So it was actually because of Jacqueline of Brooklyn Knitfolk, another podcast. She talked to me about her love for higher, and turns out she was talking about higher steels, not the sharps but the steels. And I was like, well, that seems to have the best of both worlds, because it doesn't have that really sharp needle, it's just a reasonably pointy needle, and it has the cables. And let me tell you about the higher cables, because I often run into problems with the Knit Pros that they come untwisted after a bit of knitting, especially the needle sizes I use the most seems to come more untwisted. Where's the higher cables? When you join here, this rotates. How cool is that? So any sort of bias you have in your hand when you knit gets counteracted by this entire thing rotating. And I love that. And so I've still loved my Knit Pro Novas, but I found that I do wish Knit Pros would have these kind of cables. And so with higher sharps, I got that. So just to give you a comparison, let's try that. I think you can easily see which is the sharper of the two. These are the same size otherwise. Yeah. This one is really good for any sort of snaggy yarn, be it a colorwork, you know, Norwegian type yarn, or Shetland yarn, or even like Quince & Co, which I'm using these for at the moment. These are great for, you know, superwash merino, single ply yarn. So very happy to have that to choose from and have them compatible with these cables either way. I do suspect that these cables might be as prone to kinking the way the Addis are, but again, haven't actually used them for Magic Loop because I only use one needle for Magic Loop, and that is Chargoos. So Chargoos have kind of become my one true love. I mainly really like the fixed needles. I actually just had these like hanging loosely in my room right now. This is like any size from 2.5 to 325 I think, because I use them all the time. They go into my mittens, into my socks. These are my go-to magic loop needles. I didn't really think I would like these because the cable is so fixed. Like, you know, people say, oh, it has no memory, look at that, it's just like opening up. Looks like it actually has a little bit of memory, but yeah, it just opens up like this. And the join is the smoothest thing because this steel cable just becomes a natural extension of the needle. So when you push stitches back here or this way, it is so smooth. But also the cable is so flexible. Look at that. This is great for magic loop. It crosses over super easily. Knitting this way all the way up to here, the cable will accept this. So I think that's really good. I had not expected to actually like these needles. I had even mentioned earlier on the podcast that I wasn't a fan because I thought the stiff cable wouldn't jive with me. But actually, this is my go-to needle now for mittens and socks. Completely. Actually, my earliest encounter with Chargoos was not as friendly. I had just fought with those 9-inch Addy needles and I just did not get on with them. They're too small and fiddly. So I thought, okay, I will try other 9-inch brands, and someone gave a raving good review of the 9-inch Chargoos and I tried them. I found the cable to like stick to the yarn. I don't know what happened. I was angry when I was knitting with it because I invested so much, because they're not the cheapest needles. And then after 3 rounds, it got very smooth and it just, and they are now my favorite 9-inch needles because they got that needle cable ratio down. The needles are just long enough for it to not feel too awkward. I think they just like added a couple of millimeters. It does wonders, truly. So that was my little ramble about the fixed needles, but obviously I have interchangeables. I actually have 2. One I bought for an Amazon voucher I just came across that I got from a friend taking part in some research for her. And I was sent a shorter set from Hobium, a Turkish yarn shop. So I have them both in here. So shorter in the front, longer in the back, and I seem to keep buying extra needles all the time because a lot of them are always on my projects. Same problem with Hayas and interchangeable Knit Pros, because I have a lot of garments on the go, and interchangeables for me are for garments. That is just how I work with that. I find that issues with the join when you have attached needles to the cable and coming untwisted tends to occur more often with magic loop knitting than just knitting in a round. Now let's do a little bit of a comparison. Got some needles here. See if I can identify them as I hold them up to you. So let's see if we can look at these again. From this side we have my Knit Pro Nova. So you see it's nice and slick and pointy, but not too pointy. Then we got the Haya Sharp, very sharp and pointy, nice and slick. In the middle is a Chargoo, very comparable as you can see to the Knit Pro Nova. And next to that we have a Haya Steel, also very similar. It's kind of not showing here. And in the end a Knit Pro Zing, which is a little bit more blunt than the rest of them. So that is kind of the rundown. They're all equally nice and smooth and slick. I want to say maybe Chargoo a little bit more than the others. Some might disagree and find them more matte. They're kind of matte and slick at the same time. I don't know how they do it, but that is why they're perfect. I do also like my wooden Symphony Dreams, but they aren't needles I use that much. Often it's something I will bring on the plane when I don't know how the local airport security are going to be like. I will put those interchangeable wooden needles in a pencil case, and the airport security tends not to mind. So at the very last I thought I'd make some commentary on my fixed circular needles. They live in this toiletry bag. It seems to work really well for me. I wish the opening was bigger, but yeah, I just have them organized from the shortest and thinnest needles to the thickest needles. And yeah, it works out well. There's a lot of Prim and Addy in here. They are often needles I will prefer when knitting with fixed, but more than that, the fixed Chargoos. But they're hardly ever in this case because I often, always, nearly always use them. So that is a thing. So if I'm gonna give you a very good summary, Prims and Addies fixed are great in short circumference like 40 centimeters and Addies 430 whenever you will need that, say sleeves and hats. I think Addy clicks, maybe not if you are worried about the join. And I would recommend the fixed circulars for Prim if you like fixed circulars. I would recommend more than anything fixed Chaya Goose red lace for Magic Loop. As for interchangeables, I think Knit Pro Zings are great when you would like a more blunt needle. If you want a less blunt, you could go either way with Haya Steels, with Knit Pro Novas, or Chaya Goose. They have similar tips and materials, so then you have to go with how you feel about the cable. I feel like Knit Pro are now lagging behind on the cable. Chaya Goose have great cables for firmness, whereas Haya's for flexibility, but that means the joint does snag a little bit. Haya sharps are great for superwash yarns if you want to do something like lace or twisted stitches and that kind of thing. Any Helen Stewart shawls, for instance, or Stephen West shawls, I think Haya sharps are golden. So that was my little rundown, very brief and shallow. I am starving right now, so I'm gonna go and get myself some food, and I hope you guys are well and comfortable. So that is all I have for this week's episode. I hope it was good. I had to do a lot of cutting and editing and re-recording stuff because there's a lot of background noise, and also I am not feeling the greatest myself. It's just personal reasons. It's not been great the past week or so, and that is why it just means the world to me that you guys have, you know, been so supportive with the whole Tits Out collective. I honestly can't believe it. You guys are amazing, so thank you so much. I'm just gonna go and cast on that gradient now, and in relation to that, I wanted to thank those of you who volunteered to test knit. I can't believe how many of you volunteered, and I mean, guys, you don't even know what the pattern's gonna look like, and you still just, oh, you're amazing. Thank you so much. And those of you who I didn't choose, please don't be afraid to sign up, volunteer in the future. I will have more calls out for test knitters on Instagram in the future, so just stay tuned. There are more garments, so just stay tuned. There are a lot of patterns coming, so fear not. Even if I didn't choose you this time, it doesn't mean I didn't want to choose you. It just did mean I had a lot and I can't choose everyone I want to choose even. I'm very fortunate there. If you are interested in test knitting, I do want to ask you a few things. One is, do not private message me. I write that specifically in the call out. Just comment down below with the size you want, and don't write a size you don't intend to knit. I do get private messages, and the thing is, when I go through the list of volunteer and test knitters in the end, I am only going to look through where I asked for people to write it. I'm not going to check other platforms. That is where I asked for it, so I expect people to write it there and write the size they intend to knit. So hopefully that is okay. I do hope to see a lot of you volunteer in the future, because really there were some that I was like, oh my god, why can't I choose everyone? And there will be more patterns out, so do not worry about that. So I am gonna go cast on that little gradient pattern right now. Hopefully all goes well, and I just wanted to thank you all so much for your support and for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.